We're recording.
No, I'm just I'm curious as to how you're going to conduct this podcast, because I feel like there's only one person who can conduct a meandering conversation and for it to be interesting, and that's why Joe Rogan is the biggest person. So I find there's so many podcasts that's just a meandering conversation.
Yeah.
And it's like, because I've driving back and forth to Phoenix all the time, and I listen to a lot of books, I listen to a lot of music, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, all different types, whether it's like a lot of business stuff, sports stuff, history of Mongolia, all sorts of random stuff. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And so I'm just curious, like what your brand. I mean, I know what the name of it is, and I know who you obviously know who you are. But so I'm just like curious what your goal. Like, how would you see this podcast being successful? Is it like super educational? Is it like ABC? You're like leading someone through something. You know, I'm just curious.
What I have found is that people just hear all the good about business.
Oh.
Right? Besides Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has people on and they talk about all different types of things, and you really dive deep into certain things because it's like 3-4 hours long.
But even now, it's so funny to me as someone who I randomly found him more than 10, maybe 15 years ago. I started listening to it. Yeah, before podcasts were on Apple, before Apple had a podcast app.
Yeah.
I think there was some other app. I can't think of the name of it. But anyway, so for people to be like, oh, well, he's this crazy right wing. I'm like, dude, it's the farthest thing from the truth. So, and it's like, yeah, he's just a bro. He's a bro, appeals to bros like you and me for the most part. Just like whatever Alex, the Call Her Daddy chick, is like, talks a lot about feet. I'd say probably 95% of her audience is female.
Yeah.
And with Rogan, it's, I don't know, more like 80 or something. This was just a guess. But anyway. Go ahead. Sorry. So the point is, and that's why I named it Unpacking Success. The whole point is let's take somebody like you. Let's take Skyler Reeves, owner of 6 restaurants. They're all successful. They're the local favorites, all of these different things. But it wasn't always like that. Oh. And so that is kind of what I want to unpack is number one, I don't even know your full story. Most people probably don't. Mm-hmm. Some people may know like the Skyler Reeves before the county seat and Barley Hound and Roses and all of these different things. So now it's like, okay, well, let's start from the beginning, because there's somebody out here, and this is the whole point of the podcast, is there's somebody out there watching that really wants to escape the 9-to-5. They really want to escape their normal jobs. They're not making any money. They see people like you, and they're like, well, I could never be like that. And you know very well that it is possible, but there are going to be hurdles, and there's going to be things that they have to get through. So that's the whole point of this is that there's somebody out there who's like, I want more from my life. How can I get there? What are the steps? What do I need to know about? All of these different things. And I think you are one of the most successful people that I know. So it's like, okay, now how do we break that down, and how do we really unpack it to where we can help other people? Gotcha. That's cool.
So let's start with this. For anybody watching this right now that has no clue who you are.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I grew up in Michigan. I had a great kind of normal Midwest life. Got a job in a restaurant when I was like 15 or 16. I think I was barely 16, and just really fell in love with it. And at the time I knew I liked it, but I didn't know how much it affected me, and how much I really loved it. I loved the being treated like an adult as a 16-year-old by other employees. Yeah. Because I talk about this with my manager sometimes when we have younger employees, how influential you are in their lives. It's easy to, you got a 16, 17-year-old busboy or hostess, you're like, whatever, like this guy just whatever. Like that person's like looking up to, really taking in everything that's around. And so when you're 16, the only adults are like your parents and your teachers and maybe your friends' parents. And all of those people view you as a kid. Mm-hmm. And when I came into the restaurant, I was just a guy that was like, had to bust the tables. And whether the server was, the people I had to work with were 20 or 50, they all treated me the same. Mm-hmm. And I just remember really loving that feeling. And so I, at the time I wasn't, this is me reflecting much later. At the time I wasn't conscious of that, of course. Yeah. So then I just always, I mountain biked a lot. I did a little bit of college here and there, and it never really stuck with me. But the whole time I had a restaurant job, and then I had some family in Los Angeles. I moved to LA after I lived in Colorado for a couple of years and got a job bartending. And I just stuck with it. And so now we are in Prescott, Arizona. My company's called Vively Hospitality. We have 6 restaurants. I also own a restaurant equipment and supply company called Source One.
Yeah. Okay, so this is where I kind of want to start unpacking. Is you were a busboy, you cleaned tables, you did all of these things, you really enjoyed it, you didn't know what it was going to turn into later in life. But that time gap in between you bussing tables to the Skyler today, that is what I want to unpack, right? Because because you have a lot of employees, you have a lot of bus boys and girls and dishwashers and all of these things, and you know very well, we've had these conversations before, they don't know that more is possible for them. And so conversations like this, because conversations like these are what transformed my life, was hearing from people, because I don't come necessarily from a family of entrepreneurs that think like that. And I come from a great family, but not from a family that thinks entrepreneurially. Sure. Right. And so like as a busboy or as a dishwasher or somebody who just works a 9 to 5 that they don't really like.
Well, that's the key point, that they don't like.
That they don't like.
So I think the problem with Instagram and really Instagram, I don't know, I guess the other ones too, but it's really, it's this like fake life.
Highlight reels constantly.
Highlight reel. And so, I just the thing popped up on my YouTube. It was like Dana White being like, I want to work for myself because I want to set my own schedule and I want to, and it's the opposite of that. Yeah. And so, I love this business because it's super multifaceted and I love doing lots of different things all day long. Right. And some people, like, I enjoy like reviewing law contracts. I find it interesting. I don't know if I enjoy it, but I certainly couldn't do that 40 hours a week. Right. But there's lawyers who love their job. Yeah. And that's not usually a lawyer is not an entrepreneur. And then same with, there's people that love accounting and spreadsheets. Right. And and there's people that love being a server 4 or 5 shifts a week and spending tons of times with their kids, right. And so, it's not, it's not necessarily better being an entrepreneur.
So walk through that. Why is it not better? Because
it's here's super the thing, stressful.
When people think of the entrepreneur space, when they think of a business owner, they just, especially somebody who has no experience in it, they immediately think that person's making a lot of money because they work for themselves, right? So, and that is possible. A lot of people do make a lot of money being an entrepreneur and owning their own business and all of these things. But to your point, it's not always positive. It's not always sunshine and rainbows. So I want to back up a little bit because we're kind of like fast forwarding now to the Skyler today. Busboy Skyler, working in restaurants, you kind of liked it, but you didn't realize you were going to probably own a bunch of really successful restaurants. Talk about that time in between. Talk about that time between you, because you're in school, you're bussing tables, maybe you love school, maybe you hated school, you went to college. We talked about this earlier, dropped out. There's all these different things that happen in between. Yeah. Right. So talk about that time.
Yeah. So I think it's, typical young person. I was just kind of figuring out what I liked and I liked school. I didn't love it.
Yeah. Right.
I was pretty good at it, but I wasn't super great at it. Right. I loved mountain biking. I was really dedicated to that for many years. And then that sort of changed. I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't want this super one-dimensional life. So that whole time I'm just trying to figure out who I am, and I'm bussing, and then I'm waiting tables, and then I was like, I really want to be a bartender, just honestly because it was like you were like the cool guy, like it's like, and as a young insecure dude, like you want to feel accepted and feel like the cool guy in the room, right? And I mean, as stupid as that sounds, like that's all it was. So when I moved to LA, I applied to, definitely more than 50, maybe 100 places. Could not get hired. And then I changed my resume to where I put in bold letters across the top, the greatest restaurant worker of all time.
Okay.
Skyler Reeves. And I was just like, well, this is funny, and it got attention right away.
Really?
People, like 2 different people called me. Yeah. So that was kind of interesting. And then when I got a job at this little place in Studio City, and really loved it. Like, I love the action. And again, I wasn't sitting there thinking like, this is my career. Yeah. I was like, this is so fun. Right. So fun. And then I got a job at a nightclub, and that company turned out to be like one of the most influential companies in like the nightlife business, called SBE. And so I was lucky maybe to get picked by that company rather than another one that spiraled out. And so lucky or unlucky, maybe if I picked a crappy company, then I would have flamed out quicker and ended up going back to college or something, but you never know. And so the main thing I just stuck with it. I was like bartending, and then I was a bar manager, or like assistant bar manager, and then a bar manager, and then a general manager.
Okay.
And then the general manager of 2 places. And then I moved to a different company where I had an opportunity to move up to a director of operations. And then I the whole time, but the big change, I started taking it seriously, like when I was in my late 20s.
Why that transition? Why?
Because I realized I was headed nowhere.
Okay, so I
had no
there's a couple
money.
things I want to unpack.
All
here.
I did was like bartend.
Okay.
And that was my whole existence.
So I want to go back though, because there was something there that I really think is interesting, something really creative. And you're a super creative dude. Like, we've had a lot of fun over the last year doing a bunch of marketing things, and it's really fun to implement those into the business. But you did something on your resume that was different than everyone else and different than what you've done before. Greatest restaurant worker of all time.
Yeah.
What were those conversations like when people would call you in for those interviews?
They just laughed, and I just told them, I said I
interview.
couldn't get anyone to call me back. I said, I'm going to work hard. I really want a job. I just said, and again, I was like 21 at the time, maybe 22.
Yeah.
And then my, Mike Swan is a guy I worked with for years and really looked up to. And he laughed when he saw it, and he told me a story of like when Absolute Vodka was like the coolest vodka at the time. He saw a resume where a guy took his resume and pasted it to the bottle of Absolute Vodka. So you had to look through the bottle of vodka to read the resume.
Okay.
This marketing, really, I mean, it's like how many
it really is.
business cards you get dropped off on your desk, how many, and you're just like,
and you never look at
ends
them.
up in the trash or whatever. So yeah, I mean, again, I'm not like, at the time I was just desperate. I mean, I was sleeping on my uncle's couch, and I was like desperate to get a job.
Okay.
And so I wasn't like, this is going to be so creative,
Right. Okay. So,
but the mother of invention is necessity, right? It's like,
right.
I was like, I needed a job. And so I'm like, okay, like, dude,
it's do or die.
Yeah. And I was young. I was on my own. I didn't have any money,
Right. Okay, so this is where I want to start going with this and I want to dive deep, because you have a bunch of employees, a bunch of people, and there are probably a lot of people, especially in today's economy, that are probably feeling that in their soul right now. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I can improve my life, my bank account, any of this stuff. It's like super challenging. So now I want to take you, and not everyone listening has to own 6 restaurants in order to live a good life. That's the direction Skyler chose to go, but that's not the direction for everybody. But for you, owning your first restaurant.
Yeah.
Walk us through that. How did that happen? Who were the people that you met? How did you get it started? Was it in LA? Was it in Prescott, Arizona?
We moved here to Prescott, and I was still working in LA, going back and forth. I thought I could make that work, but deep down I knew that it wasn't really going to work, because I was running this special events for a nightlife group. Right. So it was a lot of office time. Yeah. This was people didn't, I'd never heard the term work remotely. Like, I was just like, I was like hiding, and then it just wasn't going to work. And so I ended up having to quit that. And then I just got a job bartending here in Prescott, which was a tough moment, you know.
Why was it tough?
I mean, my previous job, I ran a pretty big company, Yeah.
I
mean, like, I was the guy in charge of everything in the company. And so to go from that to like just bartending, it was nice, actually. It was relieving at the time. And, but I knew I kind of wanted something else. So I was just looking for opportunities. I just started asking people, oh, what do you do? Where are you from? Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm looking. And it wasn't, I think I was good at being open to any type of a opportunity, not like I have this specific vision of opening a restaurant inside an old house that's going to serve duck fat fries. Like, I think people can be a mistake, because like the plans never go the way you plan them.
Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
And so I found this space, or I got introduced to a guy who said he was going to open a restaurant. I said, let me help you. I started talking to him and asking him a bunch of questions, and he was like, I think you know more about this than I do, and he owned a little brewery at the time.
Okay.
And I was like, I think I'm your guy, let me like do this place for you. And he ended up backing out of the deal. And so then, and he was kind enough to introduce me to the landlord of the building at the time. And then I got introduced to him. He was super kind, and he was the right person at the right time for me.
Yeah.
And so I signed the lease here at Barleyhound, where we're sitting right now. That was 10 years ago on Christmas Eve.
Oh, wow.
We signed on Christmas Eve of 2014. Yeah. And I had zero money at that time, zero. And
that was my next question. So how did you make that happen? Because there's a huge misconception around people, especially in the entrepreneur world, where everybody had a big break. Everybody has somebody backing them. Everybody has money backing them. Nobody can make it on their own, really and truly. Everybody always has somebody that when they fail, they pick them back up. When they lose money, they give them more. So how did that operate for you?
Well, I cultivated those relationships over the years.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, 3 people invested in me were my regulars at the previous place I worked.
Okay.
Like, so
Yeah.
they liked me so much as a bartender, they were willing to give me money.
Right.
And I knew the money was always going to be the toughest thing to get to the next point. So my previous job in LA, I learned everything I could about the money. I read legal documents. I asked questions constantly.
Right.
And that my boss said he was really willing to tell me whatever.
Yeah.
And most people aren't. And so, I mean, I've thought about, actually, we should do like a class, like some further down the road in my career, I'd be more open to telling every single little detail, but a lot of it's private. But if someone wanted to come up to me and say, hey, how did you raise that money? How would you suggest I raise money? Yeah. I have tons of ideas about that.
Okay.
And typically the investors get their money back first. And so you don't, and it's super risky. And so you do need friendly money. So, but what I don't buy is people that say, well, I don't have a rich uncle, you know. Well, neither do I. My cousin gave me some money that I borrowed.
Right.
A guy I used to bartend with who ended up doing really, really well in New York.
Right.
He gave me a little money.
Yeah.
So, but they all got their money back times, you know, and they did well.
Right. We're going to dive into all the details, but we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be right back. All right, so we are back. We're going to continue diving into the details. So we were talking about how there's a huge misconception around people and starting businesses, and you really can't start a business unless you have people backing you. Of course, you have to have the right relationships in place to make those things happen. So for somebody,
it depends on the kind of business too.
Right, exactly.
In your business, you
Not really.
need much less money.
You just have to be good at relationships.
Yeah.
So for you, though, you have to be really good at relationships, enough to where somebody will hand you a check. Right. Usually a pretty sizable check, not, a couple of thousand, a couple hundred sometimes. So let's talk more about the relationship side of things, though. So if somebody out there, they're like, I want to start my own bar. I want to start my own restaurant. How do I get investors? How do I talk to people? Talk about the relationship side of things. What should they be thinking about?
Yeah. Well, I think that's all of life.
True.
It's everything. I hung out with a friend of mine last night who sold his company for lots and lots and lots and lots of money.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we were laughing. He goes, that's all this whole thing is. That's all life is relationships. I heard someone say the other day, he goes, you're one relationship away from your life completely changing. And what that doesn't, I think someone more naive might think, oh, I'm going to meet this rich guy and he's going to give me this big check. It doesn't happen like that. There's no Robin Hood out there, and so when I say with a relationship, it could be your future wife or husband. It could be a mentor who introduced you to the right banker, who's willing to listen to you and get creative. It's like, and so anytime someone tells me I should meet someone, I do it. I go out of my way to do it. And that's kind of awkward. I mean, I think a lot of people, especially grown men, are like shy to be like, hey, my friend Mark told me to call you. You want to grab a coffee?
Yeah.
You want to go on a date? And I do it all the time.
Yeah.
I enjoy it, and it's also sometimes feels awkward or something like that. But so those the people didn't just give me money; they invested in something that they thought was gonna. And I had to have a lawyer, and it's lots of work. It's not like, oh, I met this guy and he's rich, and so he doesn't care about money, so he
Right.
gave me money.
Yeah.
Those people are so freaking tired of people asking them for money. So that's one thing. The other thing I'd say is, do you know how many people have asked me for advice in starting a restaurant
How many?
in 10 years? One.
No.
I think one, maybe two. Like, and so, I mean, I would give it away all day long. And so I just think people aren't that
Interesting.
hungry. I think that's okay. I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's like it's
Not for
it's
everyone.
not for everyone. And in the same way, being a CPA isn't for everyone.
Right.
And being a center in the NBA isn't for everyone.
Right,
I mean,
right.
like, I would love to play in the NBA. It's
Yeah.
not happening, you know,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
but it's like, would I really, it's like, meaning like, if I was really that passionate about sports, I could figure out how to work for the NBA or the NFL or,
Right. Yeah,
but like,
right.
it's a hobby for me.
Right.
And I think a lot of people thinking about owning their business is like a hobby.
Yeah. So you were talking about relationships, and like I feel the very same way. If somebody wants to meet with me, or if I want to meet with somebody, or usually though, if somebody asks like, "Hey, can we meet?" and never say no. Like I want to try to meet and connect with as many people as possible. However, there are people out there who just waste time. And they just never, they don't really have any real ambition. So how do you vet those people to say?
Well, you
like,
just ask them if they're selling you something right away.
Okay.
I say, "Are you selling me something?"
Yeah.
I think how did we meet?
How did we meet?
No, you reached out to me like multiple times.
I did multiple
You did
times on
multiple
Instagram?
times. No, you didn't. No, I'm remembering. And now I'm remembering. This guy wouldn't stop emailing me. No, but so obviously you're selling something.
Right.
So and that's okay.
Right.
What would have not been okay is I had this experience where a guy, I wish I could remember his name right now because I would tell everyone not to ever. So the guy was like, "Hey, I really got to meet with you about something. We have some mutual friends. I'd love to meet you." He didn't say I would have to meet with you about. He posed the whole thing like, "We've got to meet. We know a bunch of the same people."
Okay.
And then we meet, and I'm like, "Cool, what's going on?" And he was like, "Your restaurants are incredible." I'm like, "Oh, thanks, man. And this and that." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." Like, and he was good. He was good because it took me a while to figure out, like,
Okay.
this guy's selling something.
Yeah.
So after an hour of this and that, and so he's trying to sell merchant services.
Got
And so, which is, for those that don't know, it's like the credit card processing.
Okay.
And it's kind of a slimy business. It's meaning there's just a lot of people that get into it, and
Yeah.
it's hard to.
The way you and I met, though, was kind of just a follow up. I was just following up. I was like, man, I would love to work with these guys. We met up here, like at the Barley Hound.
That's right.
And I was just like, hey, I just believe that this could be good for you and the concepts and everything else, right?
Yeah.
And then there was some like, all right, I'll get back to you. And then I just kept following up. And then
Yeah.
we started doing stuff.
And honestly, part of that's a test.
right, true. Okay.
You can email me next week, and if I get an email next week, I'm like,
Right.
"Oh, he remembered.
Right,
He's got
right.
some sort of organizational system."
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So I think that the most important thing that I want to do before, we start wrapping things up is for somebody out there. This is my biggest passion right now is for somebody out there who's like, I just want more in my life. That could be not restaurant business.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody listening to this, like you may be listening to this and you're like, I could care less about restaurants. You love restaurants. You love the space, all of these things. But what advice do you have for somebody who has done it, who has built the businesses, who has scaled the businesses, who have dealt with the employees, all of the different things? What advice do you have to somebody that's like, okay, I want to start a business. I have no idea where to start. Where's that starting point? Whether they're a busboy or whether they work a really $200,000 a year salary that they hate and they want to get out of it.
Yeah.
What if you were them, what would you do?
I mean, boy. I think I would ask myself, if I was telling like a good friend who was younger or something, I would really try to understand why you want to do this thing.
Right.
Is it for your ego? Is it just for money?
Right. It's a good question.
Those are fine motivations,
Yeah.
but you should know that going into it.
Yeah.
So I want to really understand why, and then I think you got to pick your path, and then I think
Yeah.
you really got to stick with it.
Right.
So many people I see,
Try for a while and then quit.
yeah, or they're not like totally all in on it.
Right.
And there's, I think I told you this story. It was, I was listening to the Netflix CEO guy, and he was giving
yeah.
advice at a business class.
The Acquired.
And so, Yeah, it was unacquired. Yeah,
Maybe.
And so so it was like someone's like, I got to raise $10 million. I got to do this, and because like all that stuff is in the news now, and it's on Instagram.
Yeah.
Like, you can start that business with zero.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you really want to start a restaurant, then like start selling tamales under a cottage license.
Right.
And go and knock on the door of every single person in your town and sell them tamales. Like, you don't need money to start it. You know? So it's like, that's the part where people will start to be like, well, I'm not really going to make any money if I do that, and that's this, and so it's like, you know, maybe that's a silly example, but there's some version of that that exists, and so I think I hope that I do sense there's a little bit of a shift in some of the stuff online, but it's like you said, it's just like these pictures and the private jets and all this shit. It's just like so irritating to me. So irritating. Yeah. And it's like hashtag entrepreneur. It's like, I don't know anyone who actually started their own business who writes hashtag entrepreneur. Like, you know what I mean? I mean, maybe like, it's just like
Bethany does.
Other than that, this chick over here. No, but you know, I mean, obviously there's, I'm exaggerating a little, but not really. No. You know, it's like, so I think I didn't set out being like, I want to own my own business. It was like, I love the restaurant business. I want to do it my way. Yeah. And I can't wait to be the guy that makes every single decision. Right. Like, that's how I looked at it.
Okay.
And then I did have a loose plan in the back of my head, but like there was no backup plan. I mean, that's another cliche, but it's like, I couldn't fail in this restaurant, or I was going to be in really, 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 really tough shape. And I mean, but again, it's like, it's not like my leg's going to get blown off. I'm not going to battle, you know? So it's like, I would just get another bartending job, and I'd be in a bunch of debt, and I'd figure it out.
Interesting.
But, so I don't know what the question was, the advice. Like, yeah, I think understanding why you want to do it is important. And then sticking, like I said, I started taking it more seriously in my late 20s, because like I had wasted a lot of time. Yeah. I mean, I was just, you know, having a really good time.
Because during that time you were like, it's fair to say that you were broke, because that is where I like to go too, because again, I don't really care about helping the people who are rich. Like, I just don't. You know, I want to help the person who just wants more in their life, and I don't care if it's making an additional $25,000 a year, but you're probably not going to get that at your job.
Yeah.
So there's all these different things, right? Because like, I respect and admire people who can work a 9-to-5 job and love it. I think that's the coolest thing ever, right?
Totally.
You have a 401k, you're taken care of, you have all these great benefits. I think it's the coolest thing.
Or like be a solopreneur, like like you are a drywall guy or a framer, or you do framing and you got a truck and you're just your solo guy. Those guys can crush.
And then as you grow,
and guess what? They take Labor Day and Memorial Day and Christmas off. Yeah. Today's the night before Christmas. I am going to seal the floors at Rosa's at 10 o'clock tonight.
That's what you're doing tonight?
That is what I'm doing tonight.
The night before Thanksgiving.
Yes, because we're closed tomorrow. So the smell of the chemicals will go away. So I'm not like, oh, poor me, but it's like, it's not like I'm like, oh, on this laying around on this bed of money. Like, I trust me, things are way easier now than it was before. Yeah. But I also like to say, don't be like, oh, I work 8. I used to really take pride in that. I work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, no matter what. I work a pretty balanced schedule now. It's more stressful in some ways, but so I would read. This is other advice. I'd read like 5 to 7 good business books,
really,
and then stop consuming that shit and go do it. Because they all say the same thing.
Right. So like, at the end of the day, when you're sealing floors and when you're doing all of these things, do you love that process? Because there's some people who just love the things that aren't glamorous.
Yeah.
Like, they just do. Like, for me, like the editing and all of these things, like, I love it. There's some people who hate it. Yeah. Like, I can spend all night doing it, and I like it.
Yeah. Tonight, I'm looking forward to, because I'm going to do it with one of my friends. And, I mean, it'd be easier to just be on the couch watching TV, but like, it's kind of we've done it a couple of years before, so it's kind of a fun like ritual. Yeah. So and I still like to go in and bust tables and stuff, but the difference is, it's kind of disingenuous. I don't have to.
Right.
And so like when I was
have
bartending
to.
5 or 6 nights a week and my hands are bleeding and my back hurts
Right.
and I'm dealing with the customers every single night because I had to pay the rent.
Right.
Like that's a different feeling than
That's
me
different.
like popping into the restaurant to like
Just like,
be
I'm
a
gonna clean
hero,
this
you know?
plate off
Yeah,
the
yeah.
table. Yeah.
So, but I actually love working in the restaurants more than ever because I get to do it less.
Right.
I don't like reviewing leases.
Right.
It's stressful. I still am not that great at it. It's a big commitment. Like those are the things when I look at my to-do list, I'm like, oof, like, you know,
Yeah, for sure. I think that what I hear enough of is like, oh, like anybody can build a business, anybody can do this, anybody can do that. And then I see a lot of people, especially like in this entrepreneur world, like crapping all over people who work a job. And it's like, why do people do that? I hate.
Well, those aren't real successful people.
I know. I just am like, look, those people are so happy.
Yeah, maybe.
Like a lot of times, like I know a lot of people who are really happy going to work, clocking in and clocking out. Yeah. And I just think that's so cool. They could care less about,
or being a nurse, or being a firefighter, or being a police officer. Those are like super noble professions. Teacher. I think those are all awesome jobs. And I do think it's kind of bullshit that it's like someone who owns their business is put on a lot of people put that person on some kind of pedestal over like my daughter's teacher.
Right. Exactly.
You know, like that job seems way harder to me.
For real.
To me, and obviously that teacher loves it. You know?
Okay, so last couple things. You have a lot of employees. You have a lot of people that you manage and that you have to hire managers. You have to delegate. You have to do all of these things. What has been the biggest challenge when it comes to hiring, firing, delegating, giving people responsibility, taking it away? What has been the biggest challenges with that? Because this is for somebody who has built a pretty good business by themselves, maybe a partner, maybe a couple of people, and now it's like, okay, we want to continue to scale. We love it. We want to scale it. We need to bring on people. How do you do that process?
I mean, at first it was really hard to emotionally let go of things. For the first 3 years or 4 years.
The delegation part.
Just letting someone else close the restaurant. Like,
oh, wow.
I would call them all the time and look at the cameras all the time. And and now you just get used to it.
Right.
You know, it's like dropping your kid off at daycare. The first couple times you're like, this is so emotional. And then you're like, get this kid to the...
Get him out.
Yeah. So... At first, it was just an emotional change, and then now we have not been great at training people.
Okay.
And so I have not done a good job with that, and that's our big focus moving forward.
Yeah. Okay.
We've done a bad job with that.
Yeah. I think it was really cool when it comes to this topic. I was just thinking about this when it comes to hiring, firing, doing all of those things. Gary Vee comes up with this saying all the time. He's like, hire fast, fire faster, promote fastest. Do you agree with that?
He's so good at these like
little
bite-sized things that sound so easy, you know. You know, coming out of COVID, everything is just different. I mean, we hired anyone that walked in the door for a while there, any single person, I'll admit it, and that fucked up our teams in a lot of ways. We don't really have any other choice. The fire fast thing is true. Like
fire faster.
I mean, it depends on your situation. Right. I mean, it's like, do you need a bartender this weekend?
Right.
Like need?
Yeah.
Then that's different. Like, whereas if you're like, hey, look, Jim, our bartender who's been here for 2 years is moving out of the state, and we need someone in January.
Right.
Let's interview a dozen people, and let's bring them back for a second interview, and let's give them a trial shift, and then let's give them a personality test, and then you know, and so that might be one path. But the other path might be like, we're in a pinch, let's hire these 3 people. Or if I'm getting ready to open a new restaurant, I'm gonna like, you kind of overstaff it, and some people aren't going to make it. Some people you got to fire, and you can't be chicken about firing them. Yeah. You're doing them a favor. True, You know, this one of my new favorite quotes is like, tough love is the most important kind of love. Yeah. Or something like that.
That's true. Like in most cases. And like, I feel like as we like progress in society, we have less tough love. Would you agree?
Especially in this country.
That's what I'm saying. Like in just our society, like
Yeah. It's like, well, maybe Bo, like, this isn't feeling, like, no, you did a terrible job at this. And that's the feedback.
So how do you show like that tough love, but also show empathy at the same time, to where it's not always like, this guy's a jerk, he's always hounding me about things, he's never, like, do you show an equal amount of appreciation?
You tell me. It's the hardest thing. Yeah. So I'll be honest, like, it's super hard. It's super. I try to really say thank you to managers. We try and make sure they're paid well and correctly.
Right.
And by also this year, we're really trying to get better at giving that tough feedback, that coaching. We're calling it coaching.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you have to be coachable.
Yeah.
And I have to be coachable too.
Yeah.
As the main boss,
Yeah.
And I have to seek out the coaching, because I'm well aware that most employees and customers aren't going to tell me what they really think to my face.
Right.
That's
so true. All right, so we are going to wrap this thing up. First of all, I appreciate you, Skyler. Thank you for doing this. I know.
I will interrupt you. Say the only reason I'm doing this is because I think you've tried really hard to over deliver on your promises, and you've gone out of your way to get me involved with the social media stuff.
Yeah.
And so honestly, like, I don't. So I'm doing this. I don't I'm doing this as a favor, but it's like, I don't seek these things out. You know what I mean? And honestly, I'm like, does the world need another podcast of me talk? But that's not for me. This is your thing. You know what I mean? So that's why. And so that's the last thing I would say is, like, there's plenty of. I've said no to a handful of things recently. I'm trying to get better at saying no to things, because people ask me for stuff all the time. And so, and that also sounds so arrogant. People ask me all the time, but it's like, it's like, hey, will you come to this event? Hey, will you do this thing? Hey, can you volunteer for this thing? Can you donate to this thing? And it's, at some point you got to start choosing your battles.
Right.
So the reason I'm doing it is because I think you've over delivered, and you've, there's so many people that, like, all you need is an iPhone to sell the services that you're selling. Right. And so to stand out in that is a big deal. So congratulations to you. So I have a question for you. Where do you think you are doing, where you think you can improve the most in what you've been doing so far with your social media? Like where have you failed, or where could you improve the most?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I feel like it's on my end operationally continuing to improve. Being faster, being more efficient, being more consistent, and all the things. And that's
give me one example of something.
Yeah, so like just having more structure too. So like, for example, like, let's just take our relationship with what we've been doing, being more disciplined when it comes to, hey, we're meeting on these days, on these times, so where it's not so scattered.
Yeah.
And it's hard sometimes, and I don't want to use this as an excuse, but schedules are so busy that it's hard sometimes to be like, all right, well, nothing else is going to probably happen this week, so every Tuesday we're going to meet and shoot content. It sometimes is not that easy. Like, your daughter may have something come up. My family we may be out of town. You may be out of town. So I think for me, building out more of an efficient from an operational standpoint, being like, okay, this is more of what we need to be focused on, is so that we can continue to deliver faster and better and more efficiently. Right. And the other thing is especially with what I do, is paying attention to where's the attention going next, and how can we make sure that we grab that attention. And so I feel like we've done, specifically you, like I've helped, I'm just the camera guy. You guys and your teams have done an amazing job. Number one, just being willing to say, okay, look, we're going to do this, and we're going to be open to the ideas. And then you start seeing little bits of success, and that's like, just keeps fueling that fire.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just those two things. It's like just operationally becoming a better operator of what I'm doing. And that may be hiring right people.
Like the nuts and bolts, or the blocking and tackling, or like,
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then on the creative side of things, just being like, okay, how can we do things for you, for the county seat, for the Barley Hound? How can we do things for you that stand out amongst the crowd? Because there's a bunch of restaurants, there's a bunch of coffee shops and bars and all of these things. How can we help you stand out, so we're not doing the same types of things?
Yeah, because like some of the like we call the
trends,
baiting and trends. There's nothing wrong with it, but everyone's doing it. That's fine.
Right.
But I think it's that, and something.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, no, I appreciate. I've learned a lot from you. I feel honored to have been able to like work alongside you and the teams and stuff. And it's cool to see just the progression of how things continue to work. And it's really cool seeing people come in and, you know, talk so nicely about the places. And then when they start seeing like the social media side of things, just being like, it's cool to see your guys' faces. And I think that's the best part of it is it's, you know, you're not just another restaurant that's taking a picture of a pizza. Like you get to know the people that work there. And so, anyways, I know you don't do these things all the time. And so I do appreciate you for doing this. Thanksgiving is tomorrow. So really quickly, you're talking to these people.
Oh,
what are you thankful for? Most thankful for?
Oh, my daughter.
Don't just give surface level answers.
My surface level. It's my child, bro. My whole family. The basics of family health. Yeah. I mean, that's, to put me on the spot. I mean, definitely that. I am thankful for a day off.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll take a good day off tomorrow.
Yeah.
Might check on the floors, but I mean, so many things. Yeah. I have some new stuff that I'm thankful for that I've worked really hard at that I can't quite talk about yet. So that, and the health is a big one, so, cause it's, if you've dealt a lot with, difficult, health related things with family members, not just, I got a cold, but like, here's a mysterious such and such, that's it really puts things in perspective. You're like, doesn't matter what the stinking Instagram post is. Like
it's so true. It's so true. And like, I can go so many different directions, like with that. And, for me, it's been, there's so many things I'm grateful for, but for me, like working with you and working with people and doing this, it's like the health and the wellness of you and the people that you love is like everything. And when you start thinking about like, well, what is even the business? Like, why do I think so hard about it? Why do I do this? Why do that? Obviously it takes care of your family and you're able to do the things that you want to do. But then like with social, I feel like that message that you have is like, why does this Instagram post care? Like, why does it matter? Whatever. Like there's somebody out there who needs that message. And I just think that's why I love social, is not because of like, look at me, but like there may be one post that I make that gets 12 views and one of those 12 is in a really deep, dark place. And me being like, smile more, like you're breathing, you're happy, whatever my post may be. Like, I think
you see it so positively.
I really
so
do. Like
I see it as this death spiral of like a evil societal cancer that's ruining our attention spans, our children, and enriching two giant corporations. It's like, I'm joking, but also not, right?
It's true. It's true,
crazy.
Though. But like, again, I just see it from a different perspective of like, yes, it's so dark. There's so much darkness. There's so much negativity. So why not flip that script and just be that person that's like, hey, look, I own a business. I go through hard times. I struggle, in my head. I am depressed. Like whatever your situation is, there's somebody else out there that needs that.
Yeah, and the other thing is I've already consumed like all that content that I need for my life because between 5 and 10 years ago, I was seeking that out so much.
Right.
And so now like I like sports, so I listen to, like, that's a good distraction, or like history of some country I don't know anything about, or I'm trying to like do more. And so that's not really on Instagram, but it's on YouTube.
Right.
It's on like Substack.
Right.
Like that's a positive piece of it. I just think of like me doom scrolling. Like, did you see that, like the meme where it's like 10, 4 tips to sleep. And it's like, don't have coffee before. It's like, don't do this. Yeah. And it's like, watch 200 4-second videos with a screen 6 inches away from your face while you're in bed to put the phone, and I'm like, I definitely don't do that.
No, it's good. I mean, and the reason I wanted to have this conversation was definitely to hear just more about your story, more about the things that you've accomplished, where you come from. And I think it's just cool. So again, thank you.
Yeah, no problem, man.
This was fun. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. Follow Skyler on social. He has some cool stuff coming out. And obviously all of his restaurants. If you live in Arizona, check out his restaurants. They are some of the best in Arizona. And so I just appreciate you. So thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for the next one, guys. See ya.